Hello guys and welcome to my OBS tutorial on the best settings for the best PCs. My PC is an okay PC, it's a pretty good PC. I use very high settings and I made this video in the hopes of you guys also wanting the best quality out of your PC, I guess. If you believe your PC is a beast or at least pretty decent, these settings should help you out. You can also adjust them to fit whatever you want. But the first thing I would suggest you do is you go up to Docs. Whoops, let me just do this. You go up to Docs, then you enable stats. It's these things up here, all these stats up here that you will definitely find useful if you're trying to figure out what settings best fit your PC. This is a must-have if you're trying to figure that out. Otherwise, you can't see how many frames you lose due to rendering lag or encoding lag. And for those of you who don't know, rendering is GPU lag and encoding is CPU lag. I really hope I got that right. But yeah, encoding equals CPU and rendering equals GPU. And that's going to be relevant later on in the settings, so keep that in mind. So these two, very important. The other ones are just nice to have. Especially the memory and the disk space for the highest settings, just warning you ahead of time. But yeah, now that I have ready you guys for what we're doing, let's go into the settings themselves. Alright, of course it lags a little bit because I'm recording an OBS from another OBS, so I actually have two OBSs running, just so you guys know. So it's not the best thing in the world, but I mean it works. So first off, we have general. These are just personal settings that you might want to change or not. They won't change anything in the settings or the videos themselves. So these are just like change whatever you want for your own luxury. Next up, we got the stream settings. These also don't mean much. It's literally just where do you stream to? And then you input all this stuff here. As you can see, I did it to restream and stuff, but I haven't streamed in a while. So, you know, it's good stuff. Next up, we got the output, which is arguably the most important one. That and the video are the two ones you must watch in this video in order to actually get better results. Now, my streaming one is, I haven't messed with that for a while, so I don't know if that's still up to date. But when I messed with it, I used the encoder NVIDIA NVENC, which uses the GPU to scale. So that's something to focus on. So in this, you have three decisions. You have the CPU, which is the X264. And then you have the NVIDIA NVENC. This uses CPU. This uses the NVIDIA GPU. You will not have this if you don't have an NVIDIA card. If you have an AMD card, I think QuickSync is the one you should pick. But just know that these two... these two I think are like GPU specific and this is CPU specific. So do you keep that in track? Or track of that, or which GPU you actually have. Otherwise, you cannot use the NVIDIA NVENC, but I would suggest using that if you have an NVIDIA GPU. 100%. And I hear singing in the background. Oh, I just looked up random chill music online, so it's good. Up here you also have the audio tracks, depending on how many audio tracks you want. Won't really do anything to the quality. It's more for like after you record the video, you want to edit the audio and stuff in an editing program. That is kind of where that plays a big role, or plays a big part. When it comes to rate control, I would recommend CBR, constant bitrate, for streaming. Either CBR or VBR. Never CQP or lossless. CBR is constant bitrate. It pretty much means it always targets this specific one, and it doesn't really go between some. Whereas variable bitrate goes between a certain bitrate. Just copy my settings if you're wondering about stuff. This is best for Twitch. If you have too high, some people will buffer, but you can actually increase this as well if you really want to. Like, just experiment yourself sometimes. These settings are very good to start off with, and if they don't work for you, then you can just, you know, up them yourself if you want more quality, or down them yourself if you have too much. Preset should always be quality, or max quality should always be the case, but quality I picked because it's a stream. You're not going to get too much quality anyway. And profile always high, no matter what, always high, unless you have issues with the rendering and the encoding. So yeah, that's what you should watch out for. Look ahead and psychovisual tuning. I mean, I would say keep those on. You can hover over these and it should tell you what they do. The dynamic B frames technically removes this option here totally. It just takes however many B frames it needs. And psychovisual tuning, if I remember right, it just does it so it optimizes the user bitrate for the visual quality. So like those two, I always recommend having ticked. If you don't need look ahead, technically you can just put 2 down here and it should be fine. But I recommend having it on if your PC can handle it. For me, I just think that's a good idea. So yeah, do with that what you will, but that's what I would recommend. Now to the actual settings that I know stuff about. First of all, recording type should be standard always. I don't know if anyone else doesn't have that, but I would always recommend standard type. And the recording path actually plays a big role, because I used to get a lot of rendering and encoding lag, and I even made a separate video that people didn't really like that much about my fix for it. And my fix was literally just changing this path to where my OBS is located. Like as an example, if I have my OBS on another drive than where I have my videos go to, it's going to take longer for them to get there. So I would definitely recommend making sure that your path is also where you have your OBS installed. In the same drive at least. Preferably an SSD. That is how you will get the best videos. First of all, OBS and your recording path, make sure to take both of those on an SSD. Otherwise, you're gonna have a harder time. And this is just a preference. Now the recording format, I actually argue that MP4 is easiest for me. But the best one, I think, is technically MKV. Because if you record an MP4 file and your OBS crashes or your power goes out, you will lose the file. It will get corrupted and you cannot like rescue the file or resurrect it or whatever. It's done for good. So if you use an MKV file as an example, you can easily... It saves itself after it gets cut off, so you can reuse that all you want and it can't get corrupted. But you have to remux it afterwards in order to actually see it, at least with what I have on my PC, so I prefer using MP4. But if you want the most, I guess, the best experience, and you have a lot of power outages and your PC sometimes shuts off or crashes or whatever not, MKV is the best one for you. But if you know you're gonna be fine and you won't have power outages all the time and you live in an area where that sort of stuff is extremely rare, I would go with MP4, because that's just less work for you. Now that's just my opinion. I'm not a professional, but this has worked for me so far, and I recorded for 3 years, so that's something to keep in mind. Again, the encoder, NVIDIA. Oh wait, these are new. What? I've never seen these before. Surprise. But yeah, NVIDIA NVENC for NVIDIA graphics cards, and exactly the same as I said before. Recommend these settings. Before I actually had Rescale Output. Oops, if you looked at that. Yeah, over here. Rescale Output. That's because streaming does not need 1440p, but when it comes to recording actual videos, you can get up to 8K on YouTube, and I would recommend recording what you can record, which is more or less 4K or 1440p, depending on your monitor. So keep that in mind, that your monitor also plays a part in recording higher quality videos. I would recommend getting a 1440p monitor since 4K is not exactly there yet. But in a couple years, 4K will be the go-to for everyone, I'm guessing. So yeah, I have a 1440p monitor, that's why everything here is, you know, there for me. I should probably go to video before this, but now I'm just going with output. So yeah, don't rescale this. Keep it to your monitor's refresh rate or whatever, or your monitor's resolution at refresh rate, and you should be good. And if that doesn't work for you, you can try to rescale it to 1080p. Those videos are still being watched, and if you can make them entertaining, even people who have 4K screens might watch them. Now this down here is the most important stuff once again. Now rate control in this is a little bit of a gamble, honestly. Because there are two main options you should consider in this one. One is VBR. It's variable bitrate. It makes it so your video can be between these two. This is what most people use, I think, and it's pretty much for those who want high quality but don't have a lot of space on their PCs, whereas CQP is for those people who have a lot of space on their PCs and can afford to have space. Because the special thing about CQP is it records very high quality videos, but they become huge in file size. And if you don't have space for that, I would recommend going for VBR. But if you do have enough space, like I do, I have 200 gigabyte, but honestly, this is not enough. Some games can take, like I record 25-minute videos and gameplay videos and stuff like that, and they go up to 50 gigabytes sometimes, and that's crazy when you only have 200. So that's like 4 videos going right there, and then I have to remove them to another drive, so make sure you have extra space too. But the cool thing about CQP is if you have a dark screen, it doesn't record that. It kind of just pauses it, and then like it doesn't take space if you have dark screen. So if you play a darker game, CQP might actually be the best choice, but most games don't, so do with this what you want. But VBR is definitely the go-to here, or CQP. I would not recommend lossless for anyone. Even if you have a good PC, it's just a waste. YouTube compression itself will ruin your videos lossless, so there's no point. Especially if you edit your videos multiple times or something like that, which I would not recommend, but people do that, so keep that in mind. When it comes to VBR, this is just, again, it's just less file size and more control for the person doing it. So for them, it's whatever. Just pick whichever one you prefer of these two. But I would recommend CQP if you have a beast PC in the beginning, like I mentioned. Now the CQ level, technically you should do this 14. That way you get the max quality that you can get. But my PC is not a beast PC itself, so I'm gonna go with 15. YouTube compression is going to ruin the video anyway, so you can go from 15, 16, 17, 18 if you want, but not above 18. I would not recommend going above 18. What the numbers actually mean is the quality level. So the lower the number, the higher the quality, whereas the higher the number, the lower the quality. So 18 is the lowest quality I would recommend on the CQP level. So that is what I would recommend, going to 14 or 15. But I would not recommend going below that because it's not going to matter in the end. And I would also not recommend going above 18 because it would just be awful for you, honestly, or the viewers, because the video will be compressed through an editing software and then it'll be compressed through YouTube, so it's going to look half bad. So I would not recommend doing that. Keyframe interval, again, is going to be 2. Honestly, I don't know why it has to be 2. I don't know what this is really about, but I think it's how long it takes to render a frame or something like that. 0 is auto, it says, but everyone I have watched recommends that I set this to 2, so that's what I've done. So this one I can't give you too much info about, just know that 2 has worked for me and it still works, so 2 is good enough for me. Next up, I got the preset. Of course, since it's a video, you have to have higher standards than streaming. So max quality on everything. Profile should be high. Look ahead and psychovisual tuning, again, on, but you can turn those off if you really want to. Just, if you want the best quality though, I recommend having them on. Again, max B-frames don't matter if you have look ahead on technically, but here I decided to go with 4 because I wanted more quality than streaming. Because again, streaming should not be high quality. You are the focus. You as the person is the focus. But when people click on videos on YouTube, It depends on the videos, of course, but mainly if you do gameplay videos, the game is the focus and you're like in the middle, you know. It's nice that you're playing the game, but the game itself is what you are playing, so that's the main point. So you want it to look pretty, you want it to look nice. So these settings will do that for you. You also need to make sure you render at the right settings though in the editing software you use afterwards, if you use an editing software. Just to make sure there are no misunderstandings or anything. Oh yeah, and one thing I should have mentioned at the beginning is if you have an issue with the output mode and it doesn't show all these settings, make it advanced. It's not as dangerous to mess with these settings as you may think, and they can easily be fun to mess around with and see what happens. But if these settings are not like a no-go for you, you can go with simple and just select the preset. But usually that doesn't really do that much. It's not that nice to do, and customizing it yourself is just better in general. That way you can to mess with it. Yeah, here it even says the MKV thing. But next up we got audio. I just put my audio bitrate at 330, the max you can get. I don't record multiple tracks myself, so for me it's not a big deal. But just know that if you have some you use, they might be defaulted to 160, turn them up to 320 instead, just to make sure. And if you have the replay buffer on, try to make the time as little as possible that you know you're going to use, otherwise it's going to take up way too much space. So just recommend turning this on to how many seconds you want to record with the replay buffer. What the replay buffer is, it's just like a little highlight. It records how many seconds or how many minutes you want back in time. So let's say you played a scary game. You got a moment where you got scared and you're like, damn it, I wish I caught that on camera. You can click on the replay buffer button. That will show up down here if you have it enabled, I think. And then you can save that moment even though it already passed. It's like a nice little thing you can have if you have like funny moments or something you record. But I don't use it myself. And NVIDIA has something that's very similar. But it's a very useful tool and records high quality stuff. Just be aware that it's going to keep that, like it's going to have a constant file size that is always in the background if you have it on. So keep that in mind. And that is all the output settings that I can mess around with. Now, I will encourage you to mess around with it yourself and see what works for you. And if you start a video and this up here, whoops, I should not have clicked up there, but anyway, this up here starts to go crazy and it says you have a lot of rendering lag and a lot of encoding lag. Then just lower the settings. Try to rewatch the parts where I explain the settings and what you should do and what they do themselves, and you should be fine. I will still encourage you to experiment. As an example, I'm probably going to experiment with these two because I have no idea what they are. But it could be fun. It could be fun. So yeah, that's the output. Now for the audio. Always make sure the sample rate is as high as it can be. 48 kilohertz. Channels. Stereo is what you want for games and such. So you can hear the different environments and the different earpieces. Some games don't support it, I don't think, but that doesn't matter. Stereo is always the best go-to here. Now, I use voice meter for my audio, so desktop audio is, of course, voice meter. And my mic is, of course, the voice meter microphone. But yeah, pretty much just put your microphone here, the one you're going to record with, and your earphones here, if you really want to have your earphones here. All the other ones are just secondary, but these are the main two ones. So keep that in mind. These meters are literally just this down here, how fast this is going to react. As you can hear the music, or as you can see the music is now in the background. If I change this to slow, you can see this moving slow. Oh wait, no you can't, because it's real time, I think. But does it change? I actually don't know if it changes right in the fly. No, it doesn't, because I haven't pressed apply. But yeah, if you change this to slow, it's gonna be slow, as you can see. Change to fast, it's gonna be fast. So I have it at fast because I like to see exactly, you know, where I am in the meter. So that's something to look at. Now this is the meter type itself. I would not recommend having true peak on, just sample peak. Because like it says, it takes more CPU and you want all that to actually record, not to watch your audio. So it's better just have like an all-round sample peak than a true peak. Is in my opinion, personally. And your monitoring device, make that your earphones, make that your default, whichever ones you actually use to hear stuff in, make that the monitoring device. Because that way when you, because that way when you go in here and you go into advanced audio, then if you monitor yourself in here, you can then hear it through here. That way you can monitor your own stuff. So that is very good to have. I should probably disable these tracks so don't use them, but oh well. Yeah, that is that setting done. If I can get the settings back up again. And then down here we have hotkeys. They're not that important. I have not assigned any, so these you can ignore, you can mess around with if you want. You're not gonna break anything. That's like the best thing about OBS. You can mess around with everything, you're not gonna break anything. If you really need to, you can just make OBS itself try to fix the settings. So that's nice. Now, this is most arguably the most important thing you can change here. The output, in my opinion, is the most important, but the video resolution itself, if you set this as an example to 720, the other ones in there are not gonna matter, like in your output. So these are necessary for these. These are like the skeleton, while this is the meat in the output. So this is the skeleton. Now the base canvas resolution is the one in OBS. It doesn't change the actual output. This down here, wow, I can't talk, but this down here, however, it does change the output and actually makes the resolution that you record in the resolution you pick. And of course, you can't pick 1440p if you don't have a 1440p monitor. As an example, if you have a 4K monitor, you can pick 4K here. Even though I still recommend to record in 1440p if you have a 4K monitor, because it's gonna be very heavy to play games with that. So just pick the highest you have. Honestly, just pick the highest up here. If you have 1440p, 4K, 1080p, pick the highest you got and then stick with that. The downscale filter is a whole other topic. It's pretty much downscaling, you know, like, but the sample rate is pretty much what you want, the samples. And you want launchless. The arguments for bicubic being better, but I disagree. I've tried both, and launchless is by far the one that I can see looking the best. But honestly, you can rarely see the difference between the two, and if you can, then still go with launchless, honestly. It doesn't matter that much. Like, going down is obviously worse than going up. And launchless is just the best one, the sharpened one. So I would recommend going with that no matter what. When it comes to FPS, clearly pick 60. You can pick 59.94, but I don't think YouTube recognizes that as 60 FPS unless you go to an editing software and make it 60 FPS. So keep that in mind. But I would 100% recommend 60 FPS. Because in the end, it doesn't change that much. A little extra performance, I guess, but not good enough for a beast PC, you know. So very important to notice here. Next up, we got the process priority, which is also arguably very important. If I could speak, that would also be great. This you want at, I mean, above normal technically is where you want it, but I had issues if this was above normal, so I raised it to high, and it has worked for me ever since, because then it gets prioritized over a lot of other stuff in Windows in the background. And because I mainly use my PC and record a lot, for me it's a must-have. So that's what I use it for. Just go to high priority, make sure everything's good. There you go. When it comes to the video color and renderer, just stick it to this. Stick to what I have here, honestly. You don't want sRGB, and you don't want 601, you want 709, because that's the best supported one, and then you want it to be the color range, the partial one. I tried going sRGB, but most other editing software I've used uses... I mean, it changes stuff around. You can try to mess around with it if you want, but I recommend just sticking with the normal settings here. I tried going full, by the way, in here too. But dark became too dark and bright became too bright. So if you're watching a video, if you get a bright screen, they're gonna be blind. And if you watch a if you watch the darkness, it's gonna become too dark. So when suddenly brighter colors come up, it's gonna be weird. So just keep it at partial to make the viewer's eyes, you know, tolerate the video more. So partial is the best one. And this one, I guess you can technically mess with, but I would not recommend it. This is probably the only time where I say don't mess with it, because if you don't remember what the default setting is, that's gonna mess you up big time. I messed with this before too. I was like, wait, which one was the default again? And then I just stuck with 709, and it's worked ever since. So 709 is what I'd recommend here. And as you can clearly see by my lovely background, all colors work perfectly and everything looks pretty good. Now, those are all the settings I've messed with and all the settings I would recommend you mess with, but I would also recommend changing some hotkeys to make it easier for you to record. And then I'm going to end it on a few tips as well, this video, because I'm done going through the settings now. Like I said, I always have this up here on, going up to docs and enabling things you think are important and not important. I would totally recommend for you to do. Very important to do too. Because this information up here is essential to any video you make. Of course, you won't need it if you don't record anything heavy. As an example, like I'm doing right now, I will not drop any frames because I'm recording, you know, OBS, not a game or anything that's very heavy on the GPU, CPU. But I will still try to have this on just to see how much space I have left as an example, or how much memory it's using. Stuff like that is very important to me. When it comes to these things down here, try to disable all of the eyeballs as an example. Try to disable all of the eyeballs you don't use, because if you have these on, they run in the background. They're still on your video, they're still just behind the current picture, so disable all of the ones you don't currently use. And that's gonna give you more performance, and it's not gonna make it's not gonna make OBS take a lot of stuff from you. So fewer resources being used is always good, you know. So disable, or pretty much make the line go in front of the icon so it becomes darker on anything you don't use. That's what I would recommend, like this as an example. Right now it's rendering this, but if I turned this off and just had another thing on, that would be way better for my performance. You can also make presets. I don't technically know if they mean anything, but I recommend turning off the eyeballs of these two, unless you absolutely need them, like a picture here as an example. That's what I do. I have them like this, so that's what I do when it comes to streaming. So these are on for me. But again, recommend turning them off if you don't use them. That way, less resources being used. Now the next tips are technically not really for the settings, but more for your audiences. You can change the amount of audio in here, like how high it's going to be compared to your voice and stuff. Not going to be too much work if you have different tracks in the background, but a good little tip to do. And one thing you should always do when it comes to microphones is use a noise gate. It has its own noise gate and a limiter. Just use those two and you should be fine. I don't know if you're the first time streamer or your first time recording person, but try to use a noise gate and a limiter. And if you don't know what those are, look them up online. They're going to be very good for you. I wish I knew how they worked when I started. And then just work on it from there with these plugins if you want to. So yeah, I think those are all the advices and things I can tell you that you need. I don't know what else to really say here other than I really hoped these little tips and stuff like that helped you. I know it was a little bit all over the place, but I tried to do my best to explain everything to the point where you would understand them, and at the same time try to use them yourself and then scale it down if they really messed up your frames or all that stuff. So yeah, again, hope I helped someone out here, and hope you don't hate me for messing up the settings if it didn't work out for you, but this works for me, so maybe you did something wrong. I don't know. All I know is that this works for me. Hope it works for you too. And I hope to see you in another one of my videos where I do playthroughs and let's plays and whatever not. So yeah. Hope your experience of making videos will go alright smooth and stay awesome.